Welcome back to day 2 of this 5-day book promotion $1,000 test. This is technically the third day. This is the third video, but this is day 2 of the actual promotion. Covered day 0. Then we covered day 1, which was launch day yesterday, and wow, what a difference one day has made. I'm going to show you the data I've reworked, the visual that I showed yesterday, which was just built on one day's data. Now that there are 2 days worth of data and there are gaps in that data, it requires a little bit of reworking. I've also added a second visual so that I could track the changes, the rate of change of downloads hour by hour over time. Again, the data is being compiled manually. It's one of the weaknesses of this approach. Another weakness of this approach is that I ad stacked all of these 37 individual book promotion outlets. Some of them are aggregators. I did hear back, a change from yesterday's, I did hear back from the others that were still unknown. Book Marketing Tools is back up, and I was able to look into what they were doing. Some of those, by the way, I was going to show you this when I was in there, but some of those are already in this list. And so the difference was that I used Book Marketing Tools to submit to their free outlet, versus here, if they're in the list, then I paid a fee to have some sort of feature done. The only one that I still have not been able to validate, so BookKitty, like an hour after I had looked, she posted, I assume it's a she based on the communication, she posted to those Facebook pages, so I got a reply overnight saying, hey, go check, and sure enough, they were there. There was one individual here, I'm not sure which one it is, I'd have to go digging through here. I could just search for the word story. Oh, there it is. So Lovely Books. I confirmed the post, but this Instagram story, which was an add-on, I've yet to be able to confirm that that was actually done. I've searched Instagram for the book title. I haven't found anything. I've sent this individual a message. I haven't heard anything back. I'll give her one more day, and then I'll follow up about what's going on, and if there's been no movement, then ask for whatever that additional portion was to be refunded, because I can't confirm that it's happened. But everything else in this list I have been able to confirm or not. So you can look again. This data will be available in the links in the video comments. But let's talk about what was the big change. So the biggest change overnight, I think when we left off, I was at 25. I think the overall Kindle store ranking was 25. Overnight, it climbed up to at least 21. I say at least because there's a window of no data, meaning I didn't collect it. And Author Central, Amazon's Author Central, when you go and you click where it says, look at the historical, view historical sales data, it keeps showing the paid store data only. And this is also a mislabeling here. It says number 21 paid in Kindle store. That's not true. It's number 21 in the Kindle free store. So I think that this is the new version of Author Central that was rolled out about a month ago or 2 months ago. And maybe they don't know that this is pointing at the wrong data or has the wrong label. But in the free Kindle store, overnight I climbed at least to the 21st position. I can't tell. Maybe I broke above the 20 mark. I suspect that probably it was around 21, just given the momentum that I saw up until about 11 p.m. yesterday when I finally signed off. But I did not reach the second goal. So 2 things happened overnight. The first is that I did pass the first goal of 5,000 downloads. And that happened midday today. So yesterday, in total, there were 4,253. So that first day of launch, there were 4,200 downloads. And another thing that's been interesting is the marketplaces this is happening from. It's very international. Everything that I have done to this point has been 99% the United States, and I think Australia. Shut up once or twice. A couple Kindle page reads in Australia. I don't even think there'd been a purchase in Australia or Canada or the UK. I know I sold one book in Italy, but I know the person, so that doesn't count. And, I mean, he's a great person, but it just doesn't count. It wasn't an organic sale. But so many of these downloads, I'll scroll down and you'll see, are from outside the United States. Then today, so far, there have been 1,317, which brings it to this grand total of just over 5,500. If we refresh this, since I loaded this a moment before, we'll see. And So it's climbed, and actually I have to uncheck the paid. So just the free downloads I broke that first goal of 5,000. However, I did not get to the second goal of the number one position in the free store. And again, I did not utilize BookBub as part of this ad stack. I'm going to do another test probably in 3 weeks, and see how BookBub performs just by itself. So everybody says that BookBub is the standout leader. There's something called the Pareto principle. This is a really important principle. It shows up in marketing, it shows up in nature, it shows up in economics, which is where I was introduced to it. But 80% of outcomes come from 20% of the individuals or the groups, or however you want to define the activity that you're trying to measure. So in the case of clicks, usually 80% of clicks in some sort of ad campaign are coming from 1 in 5 of the individuals that you are marketing to. In ant colonies, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the ants. And I suspect that that's what's going on here as well, that there's some 80-20 behavior going on with the book promotion sites. I'm willing to bet that 80% of the clicks that I've received so far, or the downloads that I've received so far, came from 1 in 5 of those promotions. So there's 37 individual outlets. Some are aggregators. Like I said, in total, we're talking about somewhere probably around 50-ish individual sites. I'm guessing that 80% of those downloads came from 10 of them. And BookBub is probably in that same top tier of, I expect, and this is a good test, an a priori statement for the next test, if BookBub by itself performs somewhere in the order of 2,000 to 3,000 or more downloads by itself, then I think it's safe to group it into that same top tier. And so I'm going to run BookBub individually, but then I think probably come January or February, depending on, this is getting expensive as an experiment goes. But at that point, especially because the audiobooks will also be available in the Kindle store by that point for all 3 of the titles, I think I will do one more ad stack where I utilize all these sites all at once, including BookBub, and see if that can push me to the number 1 spot. One of the things that would be different in that experiment is it's not the holiday season anymore. So that could be part of what's going on, is there's just fierce competition. There's lots more marketing. Like I said, I've seen changes in the Amazon ads that I've been running. So the AMS stuff, I've seen a marked difference since Thanksgiving. Literally from Thanksgiving on, the behavior just totally changed in those ads. And I'm going to just keep them running and let them run all for the next indefinitely. But I expect that probably come January, their performance will return to what it was like before Thanksgiving. And so both with the BookBub promotion and with a full ad stack where all of these will be done, and hopefully I can reach that number 1 spot in the free Kindle store, I think that it's probably going to be even more likely because I won't have that holiday competition that I'm dealing with now. But it seems like I peaked at 21 in the free Kindle store. So 1 goal met, 1 goal not. But you can see down here, still the United States is dominating. And I bet this is an 80-20 pattern here if we add up all this data. Then we've got the UK, Canada, Australia, so the Anglo countries, then Germany, India, France, Spain, Italy, Brazil, Japan, Mexico, Netherlands. And I've not had any interaction from any of these countries, not on my author website, not on anything I can track on Amazon. So this is one of the other unexpected consequences of this promotion that I didn't really think about going into it, is this has given a more global reach to my author brand than I had previously accomplished on my own. Okay. Now, I say that I peaked at 21, and that's because this was at 7 a.m. By, I think, 8 a.m. it was dropping. 9 a.m. it was definitely dropping. Went to 25 again, then went to 30, then it went to 50, and I've been hovering around, and I'll refresh this. I've been hovering around 58 for the past few hours, and I expect that overnight I'll probably drop more, probably down to 80, and then I think by the end of tomorrow, maybe by the end of Thursday, I don't know that I'll be in the top 100 anymore. I'm still getting quite a bit of downloads per hour, but it's nothing like, you'll see the data is just amazingly different for yesterday versus today when it comes to the rate of change of downloads, meaning how many downloads more or less per hour am I getting with each subsequent hour. One other byproduct that was unexpected is that there have been paid, so the number of paid purchases of the other books has gone up. So six sales of the other 2 books, 3 of Disclosure, 2 of Coverted. That all happened today. I think some of that data was carrying over from yesterday. And I have seen on Ingram, and there is a lag here, so we have to be careful, but I bet tomorrow there will be more, and by the end of the week I think we'll see more. I did sell a few more paperbacks. So while the sales were not my goal, I was not planning to try to make this a net positive ROI experiment by promoting these other sales. The main purpose of this was to test what does it take to get to the #1 spot in the free Kindle store, how many downloads can I actually get, and then I'm going to watch this data over time. So I've already seen more activity on my Goodreads, I've seen more activity on my mailing list, I've seen more activity on my website. In fact, I've seen quite an uptick. I think some of this is tied to the email blast that went out, but you can see that before this, hovering around the normal everyday traffic of less than a dozen visits, and it's been spiking, and I think it will continue to spike through tomorrow and start to taper down throughout the rest of the week. But there have been these other clear effects that weren't there in the baseline data, like I mentioned on day 0, for the past few months since the release of this book. Okay, so with that, let's go look at these very interesting charts. So let's return to this data screen. Again, if you want to see how the data has changed from day 0 to day 1 to day 2, you can go into the revision history and you can look that up. But effectively what I've done is change the way that I was measuring time. I needed one column that had day and time, and I'm still tracking downloads, and then what I've done is add this other column as the rate of downloads. So again, this is a simple mathematical calculation that just takes how many downloads did I get at 9 a.m. minus the number of downloads that I already had at 8 a.m. And then it takes the difference of this, so this minus this, and then divides by this original amount. And what you can see when I plot this out, it's 2 different visuals, and this formula carries down throughout the rest of this column. Simple rate of change calculation. I want to save this for the last part just because I think it's so interesting. And if you're looking at the numbers, you can already kind of get a sense of the pattern you're going to see. But let's go back and look at downloads first. Now, something else to note. The data, like I said, if you look at the screenshots, I've been grabbing it mostly mid-hour. Today got away from me a couple times. I didn't get data until almost the second half or almost till the end of the hour. I think in one case it even spilled over, so data that's in noon was really snapshotted at like 1:05, and I had too many meetings and phone calls today, and it just got away from me. And I tried to continue to space it out in an equal interval from that point forward. So this data, again, it's approximate, but it's pretty good. What you'll see is from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m., and then I didn't capture any data from 10 p.m. until the next morning, 8 a.m. So there's 10 hours there, and you'll see how that gets aggregated up into the total number of downloads. So I think overnight there's definitely less activity, but because it's 10 hours worth of activity, it does create an artificial bump that you'll see here in this first visual. So here's the plot that we were looking at yesterday up to 10 p.m. I've now rescaled this so that it includes day 2. Tomorrow I'll include day 3, day 4 throughout the rest of the week. So today, starting here, you see this bump, right? This might look familiar for those who are following politics right now. It just suddenly spikes. And the reason it spikes is because this is actually 10 hours worth of data aggregated. So it's not as though from this hour to this hour, it jumped that much. You have to keep in mind that this is a 10-hour window. This is just a byproduct of the data. I had the choice, do I plot this day by day and then just show you individual day plots, and I think in that case the cons outweigh the pros because you don't get to see the whole trend, or do I put it into this knowing that this is not scaled the same way everything else is. This is one of the facts of data. To express it, you often have to make simplifying assumptions. Here is one. There's a 10-hour window here. That's why this bumps up. And you'll see that in the other visual that I show you. Now, when today started, you still see an increasing climb in the total numbers, but you can just tell overall this is flattening out. Like I pointed out yesterday, to get to the first 2,000 downloads was a few hours. To get to the next 2,000 downloads was the rest of the day. We didn't even get 2,000 downloads today. We got close, but what is being captured in this visual is the diminishing returns. The diminishing returns of the book promotion sites. They all had that disproportionate clustering on Monday. Some are continuing out throughout the week. And I think a big portion of what is actually driving this is that while I'm only 58th in the Kindle store overall, if we go look at the individual rankings still in the different subcategories, I checked it midday today, or mid-afternoon, and I was still number one in all 10 of them. So I think that is contributing quite a bit to the continued momentum. But you're seeing that it's getting even flatlining more and more, and I think that's going to happen. I do think with the trend we're seeing that we'll break 6,000. We only have to get 400 more tomorrow to break 6,000. I think the estimate yesterday that I said of 8,000 is probably unattainable at this rate. If it cuts, in half, let's just kind of do some back of the envelope or back of the napkin or front of the napkin math here. If we went from 4,000 yesterday down to whatever it was, 1,500, let's just go back so I'm quoting consistent numbers here, to 1,300, that was more than half. It declined by more than half. If we see the same kind of decline, assuming it's not accelerating, if we see the same kind of decline, tomorrow we'll get 500. Day after that we'll get 200. Day after that we'll get 50. Unless, of course, being number one in the individual categories is what's actually driving the rate now. And what we would have is what's called a change point. Everything up to this point was being driven by the book promotion sites. Everything from this point is mostly being driven by, again, this is an assumption, I'm not saying this is fact. Everything from this point in day 2 onward is now being driven by the fact that it's number one in all these categories. People see it, they see it's free, and they're downloading it. If that's the case, then we might continue. Tomorrow's 1,500, day after's 1,500, Friday's 1,500, and if that's the case, we're going to reach the 8,000. But I'm suspicious that that's the case. I think there's still some lingering effects of the book promotion sites. Some of them are still ongoing. But I do think that there's a heavy component of contribution right now happening for the fact that it's number one in 10 categories. But this is the great thing about data. You state your hypothesis ahead of time. We look at the patterns that emerge. And we discuss it. We'll do that same thing tomorrow and the day after and the day after. Okay. Now, if we go back to the second column here that I have added, well, it's the third column in the data sheet, but second column of data. This is, again, the rate of change of downloads. I'm just going to shorten it to the rate, but it is a rate of change metric. And it is plotted here in this last tab. And what you see, I think this is just an amazing plot, is just the absolute dominance of that first hit. When all the emails went out, when all the posting on the sites happened, and how it just started to slide from that point. So remember, this means that from 8 a.m. yesterday to 9 a.m., we saw that huge number of downloads. That's the rate of change. And if it would have continued at that kind of rate to the next hour, we would have expected this just to keep going. But even after 1 hour, it immediately started to fall. Fell by almost half. And then it fell by 50%. And we see this slide down that happens till the mid-afternoon when we see a little bump. And this bump is genuine. This bump is not, and I'll get to that in a minute. But this bump is genuine. We see an uptick in the afternoon, and then we see this kind of flatlining throughout the evening with a slight decline. This would maybe make you think, hey, 8 a.m. is really hot in the morning again, except you have to remember that this is 10 hours worth of data that's been aggregated. So this is really, talk about flattening the curve, but this should really be pushed down because this is artificially inflated simply because of that simplifying assumption that I'm not going to stay up all night taking snapshots of data. And so we have aggregated the data for 10 hours into that first observation at 8 a.m. And then notice how quickly it drops, and then it just follows the same very low level rate of change hour by hour throughout the rest of the day. And the question is it going to go lower than this, or is it going to stay at this rate now throughout the rest of the free week? And I don't know what level of downloads it even requires to stay at number one in all those subcategories. Whatever we've been doing this afternoon has been sufficient. So we can use it as a proxy. And if we go back and look, and I think this is one of the telling things about the data, is even though this has been below 1% since about 4 p.m., if you look at the actual number of downloads, right, that's 46 downloads. That's a much smaller amount, but again, that's about 50. That's about 50. It's about 50 in each of these. Now, if you think about that in real terms, that's almost 1 download per minute. So while this is a small rate, 92%, 0.92%, 0.33%, look at that dip. I think everybody was having dinner at this point. But if you then step back and you say, like, these are very small numbers, this is really low, you kind of lose track, or you have the ability to lose track of the fact that this still represents almost 1 book being downloaded per minute. And maybe that's enough to sustain the number 1 spot. And if that's the actual driver of what's going on at this point, and the book promotion effects have really tapered off and fallen to their effective 0 level, and what's taken over now is just the positioning in the store. If that's the case, then what we would expect is for this to continue at about 1 per minute for the remainder of the week, or until we hit capacity. It could be that we just tap out the available market by tomorrow or Thursday. So it'll be interesting to track this and see, but like I said, man, things change from day 1 to this fake hump for day 2. If you have questions, so I'm kind of curious if people know other things, like other tools. Maybe I don't know a tool that would show me the actual free rank over time. I tried this tool, Book Report. Something happened back in November where, because Author Central changed, it's broke some of the ability to pull in data, especially about reviews and rankings. So I couldn't use that. I was hoping that I could. That was going to be my workaround. If someone knows of a different tool that doesn't require you to have the tool at the time that you're trying to collect the data. So that's a big distinction. I would have already had to have the tool and set it up to collect the data as it was going. If someone knows that tool, please post it in the comments, because I would love to know what that tool is. I look for tools all the time. This is one of the great things about following the AuthorTuber community on YouTube, is you discover all these wonderful tools. They make so much of this possible because, again, Amazon is so opaque about a lot of this data to a level that doesn't feel necessary, because, again, it would help me, which would help me sell more books, which would help them if they would give some insight into things. Maybe 6 months from now, they'll fix that issue in Author Central, and I would have been able to see that I had peaked at maybe 18, but for now, it looks like on day 2, we peaked at 21. We hit the 5,000 download goal of the free books, and on we march to tomorrow. See you then.